Hello ladies, gentlemen, and most importantly my fellow Amiibo brethren.
Hey guys, I'm Amanda from Nerdvana.
I'm Simon from Simon Says 314.
I'm Jesse from Zelda Universe and the Nerdvana podcast.
I'm Ethan from HylianBandicoots.
And welcome to the first episode
to the Nerdvana podcast's Zelda Mailbag, where we answer your Zelda questions,
gaming,
and life questions.
You can send your questions to our Facebook, Twitter, or leave them in the comments below.
Without further ado, let's begin with some amazing questions that I'm sure you've submitted.
So our first question comes from Kayla. What are your thoughts on if Zelda Wii U story had a strong focus on Link and Zelda having a relationship? Well, I'm all for it. I am a huge Z-Link shipper. I am all for it, especially after Skyward Sword was a total huge tease. They kept acting like Link and Zelda were going to kiss. They kept talking about a kiss. Did the kiss ever happen? No. No kisses. Whatever. If Link and Zelda have a relationship in Zelda Wii U, I would be ecstatic. If there's no relationship, I kid you not, I will cry.
Question 2 comes from Corey Long on Facebook, who asks, what's your guys' favorite Zelda game? Well, Corey, my favorite Zelda game would have to be Ocarina of Time. Mostly because it was my first Zelda game. I might have Collector's Edition Majora's Mask, Collector's Edition NES Zelda game, but I started off with Ocarina of Time. I like it basically because of the nostalgia and because of the slow pace that it has, the comfortable, peaceful pace. I like Majora's Mask because of the variety that it has. All the masks and the abilities, being able to be a Gora, be a Zora, pretty cool. But it also, to me, has this race against the clock, very intense feel that sometimes I like. But most of the time, I'm a really chill guy, and I like to take my games chill, like Ocarina of Time.
Question number 3 comes from YouTube. Super J Gamer asks, does the Zelda timeline actually make sense? Gameplay first, then its story when making a Zelda game. Well, that's true. Nintendo does focus on gameplay first and leave the story for last. This way they can focus on all the ideas for gameplay that they have, build the dungeons they want, choose the items they want, and this way they don't restrict themselves to a certain timeline and using certain characters and items. This does hold back the overall story of the franchise though. But if you look at other long-running franchises, you can find plot holes in almost everything. If we look at Star Wars, a major issue people had was Boba Fett being revealed as a clone in the prequels. Now with the new trilogy being made, Disney is going back and retconning a bunch of stuff to build the story that they want with Episode 7. Going back to the Zelda series though, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. With Nintendo's focus on making the game fun and enjoyable, most of their games end up getting really high reviews. They don't require patches and updates to run. Take Skyward Sword for example. In my opinion, a great game, but due to a heavy focus on the story, many Zelda fans didn't enjoy it.
So next question, this question comes from Tony. Tony says, do you think Nintendo will let us choose whether Link is a boy or a girl? They started doing it in Pokemon and other games, so why not Zelda? That is a good question. I don't see that happening. I don't really want it to happen. I mean, I'm all for having girl characters, being a girl myself, but I would really be perfectly happy with Link staying a boy, and I think it's just because Link's character is defined. It has been set for the past 29 years that Link is a boy and Zelda is the girl. It just seems kind of weird to just change Link's sex all of a sudden after 29 years. And I think the reason it worked in other games like Pokemon, for example, you weren't so set in who that character was. The Pokemon trainer was just basically you. Whereas Link, he's more of a solid character. He has a purpose. I know a lot of people will argue that Link is simply a link to the player, and I get that. However, the story has progressed so much and the series has progressed so much that to change it up and have a girl character would just be weird.
Question 5 comes from Pew Circus on YouTube. Pew Circus asks, why does Link always show up in my garage every night? Well, Pew Circus, that's either a great question or a really poor question. For example, if you are Ganondorf, you have Zelda in your garage, or you're leaving empty bottles or milk and cookies in your garage, that's a bad question. We know why he's showing up. But if none of those are true, that's a great question. And I'm going to have to refer you to an expert. Go look up 3GI's Link to the Future 1, 2, and 3 for a very thorough answer to that question from experts.
Question number 6 comes from YouTube. Aquia L says, it's a great video, which made me think of a question I had back when I used to play Ocarina of Time. If the water is always coming into Lake Hylia, and there's nowhere for the water to go, then how does the lake not flood over big time and eventually flood Hyrule? It doesn't look like the water has anywhere to go, and how does the lake stay the same height and depth always? Well, that's actually a really good question. If we remember, the waterfall from Gerudo Valley and the river from Zoro's domain both constantly flow into Lake Hylia, but yet the water never rises. If I remember correctly, I think this is due to the water temple correcting the water levels in Lake Hylia. But I could be wrong. And that also begs the question, where does the water go from the water temple? Where does that drain into? And after thinking about it, how does it not flood Hyrule? Well, maybe it did. Maybe it wasn't the gods or the goddesses that flooded Hyrule in the Wind Waker. Maybe it was just the Zoras. Yeah, I blame the Zoras.
My last question comes from, I'm not sure how to say your name, I'm sorry. It's spelled CJKIEL, Francisco. Question is, who is the better Link? Classic Link, Young Link, or Toon Link? Hint, he always saves the day for you. Well, my favorite Link has got to be Skyward Sword Link. Reason being, he had a lot of drive. He started off kind of a dork, kind of like me, and he had Skyward Sword Link is my favorite, so I guess kind of classic Link. He's got a lot of drive as opposed to the stupid hiccup. My favorite Link has got to be Skyward Sword Link. To me, he's the strongest of all of the Links that they've ever had. He had a reason to save Zelda. He had a relationship with Zelda regardless of whether it was romantic or not. I found it romantic, but you know, even as friends, that he still really cared about her. Skyward Sword Link was invested in the journey more so than some of the others. You felt more for him, you empathized with him a lot more. And I would be all for having Skyward Sword Link having to save me. I mean, if I had to be saved by somebody, I would be perfectly content with it being Skyward Sword Link because he really cares about his friends. And that's really awesome. So Skyward Sword Link all the way.
Question 8 comes from Kapor Gabora from the YouTube. He asks, does it have to be about Zelda? I love the podcast, but you guys haven't uploaded one in a while. True. So, since everyone is giving Zelda questions, I want to ask if Simon can give us another one of his topics. Bada. Yes, I would love to give you one of my topics. So, just for you, Kapora Gabora, I have a topic. So if everyone else, then I'll speak directly to you. Okay, so since it is our first episode of the Nirvana Zelda Mailbag podcast, I figured what better topic that I've had rolling around in my head than questions. Now, why would I speak about questions? Great question. Mostly because questions are such a huge guiding force. They are a changing force. What I mean by that is the answer to a question can change your whole direction in life. So what does that mean for you and for me? Well, it means that we need to be consciously asking questions, and good questions. One idea on formulating questions, and that is the idea of being specific or non-specific. If you want something very specific, then the question that you use to get to it needs to be very specific as well. There is a place for non-specific questions. For example, to include things that maybe you haven't thought about. What do I do next? That is a non-specific question, but it's a good one. A specific question would be more like, I need to make $4,000 by tomorrow. How can I make $4,000 honestly by tomorrow? Very specific question. I had some answers hit me the other day about how I can be better. And I formulated some questions that I can ask myself that will drive me forward and help me help others and achieve my goals and just be better, because that's what I'm all about. So, Gabora Gabora, there is your topic. Thank you so much.
Okay, question number 9 comes from Toro Bob on YouTube, and he says, what do you think happened to Fi after Skyward Sword? Well, spoilers if you haven't played Skyward Sword. If you haven't, you definitely should. It's an amazing game. Despite what a lot of people say now, a lot of people have gone against it now, saying it's too linear, which I agree with, but that's not the point. The game's amazing, definitely play it, but spoilers if you haven't played it. In the final scene, we see Link returns the Master Sword to its pedestal, obviously, for the next person to pick it up, who I think in the timeline is Ocarina of Time Link, when he gets it from the Temple of Time. But yeah, basically Fi's spirit that's been aiding Link through Skyward Sword is returned into the blade of the Master Sword, and sort of put into like stasis, if you like. Yeah, she goes back into like dormancy. I don't know, is dormancy a word? I know dormant is what they talk about with volcanoes where they don't erupt. So basically, Fi is a dormant volcano. She goes back into the sword because she's not needed anymore. She's fulfilled her task of aiding Link, the hero, and she returns to the Master Sword blade, and she sort of just becomes one with it again. So I guess you could say in spirit she's with you for the rest of the Zelda games, because obviously Skyward Sword takes place at the start of the Zelda series, and then for all the other games Fi is in the blade of the Master Sword. But yeah, the actual character Fi goes back into the Master Sword at the end of Skyward Sword, so hope that answers your question quite well. Alright, so the final question comes from Jacob Gonko on YouTube. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Jacob. If not, please scald me in the comments. But he says, what do you expect from Zelda Wii U, and what do you think about it being a reboot of the series? Now, I talked about this a little bit with Jesse and Maka from Nintendo Box in one of the videos that Jesse's uploaded to his channel. Basically, from what we've seen so far, I sort of expect it to be like the Skyrim Zelda. So it's like, you know, a big open world game which you can explore, sort of like, and it'll capture the feeling of the original Legend of Zelda on NES, so you can like explore around and just get lost in the world, really. And if you look at A Link Between Worlds, which is the latest Zelda, certainly the latest non-remake to be released, because obviously Majora's Mask 3D's come out earlier this year, but yeah, I expect it to have the sort of, you can attempt any dungeon in any order, which is what A Link Between Worlds did, rather than restricting you to the dungeons and you have to, you know, go through each one in a specific order. So that's what I expect it to be, so I like the Skyrim Zelda open world type game. And as far as it being a reboot of the series, I sort of feel like every Zelda game sort of is a little reboot in itself, because if you look like I don't know, compare Twilight Princess to Wind Waker, you know, they feel like, at least artistically, two completely different games. I mean, not really in gameplay terms, they're similar, but in terms of aesthetics and things like that, they are definitely different. So every Zelda game to me does feel like a reboot, obviously with the exception of like Majora's Mask being a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, and then like Spirit Tracks sort of being a direct sequel to Phantom Hourglass. But yeah, the Zelda series does feel like reboots, but I sort of can get what you mean, because a lot of people have compared this game to being sort of the original Legend of Zelda on NES remade, and if that's what it is, sort of reimagined, then yeah, it could definitely be a reboot. But I feel like every Zelda game really kind of is a reboot anyway, even though they slot into the timeline with each other. And for it to officially be a reboot, it would have to be like didn't really place into the timeline. But to be honest, like the Zelda games don't really fit into a timeline anyway, and for Nintendo to go to all that trouble to fit all the games into a timeline, I think this one will slot in. I think it'll probably slot in probably after Skyward, because it sort of has a Skyward feel to it, like the art style and stuff. But I think it'll slot in maybe after Skyward, but before Ocarina, so when Skyloft's returned to the ground, but there's sort of a lot of building to be done and stuff like that. So, howdly doodly, there you go.
So that is all of today's questions, and
if you enjoyed this, then be sure to check out our show, the Nirvana Podcast,
where we bring on a special celebrity guest each week for a brief interview before we each bring up our own nerdy topic of discussion. I'm Amanda Van Hyle, signing off.
Alright, I'd like to thank Amanda, Simon and Jesse for inviting me over to the Mailbag. It's been great fun doing it. And if you enjoyed this episode, then make sure you leave a like, comment or whatever. And also make sure if you want your question to be read out on the next episode, you can leave your questions again in the comments or on Twitter and Facebook. And they will more than likely, if it's good, be read out on the next episode. So thanks very much. Also, you can find me at youtube.com/HylianBandicoots. We do gaming videos and stuff like that. And also we have Twitter and things as well. So the Twitter link will be on the YouTube channel. So head over there if you want to see me, and if you don't, I don't blame you. See ya.
With Zelda, regardless of whether it was romantic.
Hi. Boom! Double guns.
So Skyward.
That's me, Ella. I'm clapping my hands. Gosh. By the way, before I go, what are you gonna do? I figured, what better topic that I've had rolling around in my head than questions? Now, why would I speak about questions? Great question.
Got a lot of drive as opposed to the stupid hiccup.
How can I make $4,000 painting and beating a dead horse? Although I have I'm beating a dead horse. No idea what that would feel like.
He had a My favorite Link has got to be Skyward Sword Link. To me, he's the strongest of
all.